Tonight, the Bears pull an audible and now say they're looking at Northwest Indiana for a new stadium. Is the Hoosier state ready to play ball? And President Trump saber rattles a possible war in Venezuela. We get the very latest from Illinois Democratic Congressman Brad Schneider. Welcome to the Chicago Report. I'm Paris Schutz. President Trump signals the federal government is going to take a more laissez-faire approach to cannabis. The president signed an executive order rescheduling cannabis from a Schedule 1 to Schedule 3 drug. That means that a drug is dangerous and has no medical uses if it's Schedule 1. Examples include heroin and cocaine. Schedule 3 indicates less severity and that there are legitimate medical research purposes. And that's the stated reason for the president expediting this move in his executive order. Now, recreational cannabis use is legal in Illinois and many other states, and local dispensary companies say this could be a boon for their business.
By rescheduling it to 3, it allows us to look, feel, operate like any state legal industry in America. So that's a huge impact on us. Innovation, the ability to move the industry forward and really normalize it, professionalize it, are really unlocked by this change today.
The new classification does not mean federal legalization, and it doesn't change penalties for illegal use or possession in states where recreational use of cannabis is still against the law. The Trump administration takes steps to crack down on hospitals and doctors providing gender-affirming care to minors. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said that hospitals will be blocked from Medicare and Medicaid reimbursements if they engage in gender-affirming care for minors. Kennedy says he believes the treatment is part of an ideological agenda.
Betrayed the estimated 300,000 American youth ages 13 to 17, conditioned to believe that sex can be changed. They betrayed their Hippocratic oath to do no harm.
Some Democrats and medical groups stand by the treatment as humane and successful, especially to combat the mental health of gender dysphoria. They say the new rules get in the way of doctor-patient relationships and decisions should be made by families. Locally, Lurie Children's Hospital issued this statement, quote, "We are actively reviewing the proposed rules issued by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services related to gender care to understand what they mean to Lurie Children's." Well, Indiana lawmakers might be ready to roll out the red carpet today after Bears CEO Kevin Warren announced to fans last night they are looking at the northwest portion of the Hoosier state for a possible new stadium. This as talks on tax help for their Arlington Heights proposal are stalled. Are the Bears serious or just trying to gain leverage? Governor Mike Braun tweeted, "The Chicago Bears recognize Indiana's pro-business climate, and I am ready to work with them to build a new stadium in Northwest Indiana," ending with, "Let's get it done." This comes after Bears CEO Kevin Warren penned a letter to season ticket holders yesterday saying that they are expanding their search once again throughout Chicagoland and Northwest Indiana. Indiana State Representative Earl Harris has led the effort to lure a new facility to the region and says they are serious.
There's lots of space in Northwest Indiana where we can make this work. When you look at East Chicago, Gary, Hammond, you get pretty close to the state line. I think that is going to be important in terms of people that live in Chicago, people that live in Illinois, making it easy for them to come over to Northwest Indiana to still go and attend Bears games. When you look at the highway, having that access in, when you look at even the South Shore and the train, having that easy access in. So the closer to the state line, I think it makes it even more attractive. And if I can add to that, I'm pretty confident from what I know in terms of space, when you look at the Bears and Chicago and where they are now, moving to Arlington is actually a further trip than them coming to East Chicago, Gary, or Hammond.
But the reaction in Illinois, not so positive. Governor Pritzker called it a, quote, "startling slap in the face to the beloved and loyal fans." Meanwhile, State Representative Cam Buckner, who has been very critical of the Bears' desires, said, quote, "As people across Illinois are reeling from the weight of rising property taxes, they are not interested in a professional sports franchise cutting to the front of the line for a property tax break." Even Arlington Heights State Representative Mary Beth Canty, who is sponsoring the legislation the Bears seek, said, quote, "I encourage the Bears to engage with the General Assembly in good faith, without threats, so we can find a path forward to keep the Bears at home in Illinois."
The legislation would give them the ability to negotiate their future property tax payments with the village of Arlington Heights rather than pay full assessed value. That's something that could save them millions of dollars. Meanwhile, Mayor Brandon Johnson said if the search is once again open, then a city site should be in play.
The Bears belong in the city of Chicago. The Chicago Bears belong in the city of Chicago, right? And I've said repeatedly that the door is always open for conversations, and Kevin Warren did call me yesterday. We didn't get a chance to connect, and I still firmly believe that their best position is in Chicago, and it's evidence. The evidence is clearly speaking for itself.
And joining us to dig in more is Mark Gannis, co-founder of Sports Corp Ltd, sports management and consulting firm, and an expert on all things sports business and sports venue related. You've done many sports stadium deals, Mark. But what do you make of the timing of Kevin Warren issuing this letter to fans just days before perhaps the biggest game for the franchise in 7 years?
Well, the timing clearly is intended to get a lot of attention. Local attention, but also national attention. Saturday's game against the Packers is going to be nationally broadcast. It's a huge game in the NFL season. Going to get a huge ratings also nationally. And therefore, this whole issue is going to get a lot of attention on a national basis. That's intentional. Let's be clear. That's intentional. That having been said, it's really the audience is local more than national. This has been out there for a lot of years with very little movement, very little progress.
Indiana made no secret years ago they would love to lure a sports franchise to the northwest corner, and then they passed this sports commission that has been surveying sites for a long time, so this is not new.
Indiana has looked over the border on many different industries, many different
years
companies.
ago with the Bears.
Well, yeah, Planet Park in Gary, Indiana.
Gary.
Michael McCaskey, the late Michael McCaskey, when he was CEO of the Bears, put out a plan for it to be there. But then they're not just looking at the Bears. This could also have worked for the White Sox because that's an issue. But they've looked at getting a lot of companies moving over the state. Heck, there are 3 counties in Illinois that have asked to be able to secede from Illinois and to join Indiana. So there's clearly this cross-border battle for some of the great assets that Illinois has that are susceptible because the politics here and the economics here are challenging.
And clearly you have the governor of Indiana saying, let's do something. Yep. You saw the representative there from Northwest Indiana saying this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Would you look at what Kevin Warren is doing right now as just a threat to gain leverage, as we've seen throughout the decades here in Chicago from sports owners, or something that is a realistic possibility?
This is a realistic possibility. It's not the preference. If you read the letter and you see all the comments from Kevin and the Bears over the last X number of years, it's all been targeted towards Arlington Heights or the downtown Chicago, but it's all been targeted for staying right here. So they've made it very clear where they want to be, but you have to have partners on the other side. These projects do not get done without the government as a partner. These public-private partnerships are required for these mega deals. Now, there's the mega project legislation in Springfield that is stalled. It wouldn't just be for the Bears project, but for others.
Other big, giant developments like this.
Correct, because our state law does not allow, Illinois state law does not allow local governments to negotiate long-term property tax deals. Yet when you're financing long-term multi-billion-dollar private enterprise, the financiers want to know that that big cost is going to be a limited number.
Yeah, so to break this down for the fans, basically they would get the opportunity to negotiate for a long period of time what their property taxes are going to be, instead of wait for the assessment to come out like every homeowner does, and then the tax is based on that. So it could save them tens of millions of dollars. But the argument against that is, well, Joe homeowner doesn't get to go negotiate his property tax. Why should a $8 billion organization?
And you see, framing it that way actually is inaccurate, because first, the parties that are going to lend the money to build this $2 or $3 billion facility, they need to know the certainty of what the largest expense, that property tax expense, will be. So it's not just the Bears or the McCaskey family, but it's also the financiers of the project need to have certainty within certain range for that number, so that someday some political person doesn't wake up and say, instead of 15 million, we're going to make it 50 million, and you don't have the money to pay the debt back.
Right.
That's number one. Number two is there's only one of them. See, when you have homeowners, you have a lot of people within that have the same type of home in the same neighborhood. So you can appeal it based on comps. There are no comps for sports
That's true. They can go, the process is you go appeal your property taxes. If you think
Exactly.
they're too high.
But you can't do it because there's only one stadium. There aren't thousands of the same kind of properties. So that's why these kinds of mega projects need this kind of certainty. Now, it's a political issue. I get that. But that's why Indiana is stepping up, because they see that Illinois is politically not really cohesive right now.
But what they're saying is that there's so many things we need to work on, and you see costs rising for average citizens, grocery costs, healthcare costs, property taxes, as we mentioned. Politically, nobody wants to wear the hat of, I gave a break to an $8 billion organization.
And if that's the way it is framed, then they've lost before they've even started, because that's not reality. That is just PR spin. But that is not the reality. The reality is whatever the number will be more than whatever was paid when Arlington Heights or Arlington Park was operating as a racetrack. The reality is there will be many thousands of jobs created and more tax money going to the state, going to the city, even Chicago, because of all the events that will take place in a dome stadium in Arlington Heights. But the people are going to stay in downtown Chicago when they're here, with the restaurants and more.
Well, they could stay in downtown Chicago if they're going to Gary. As the representative said, Gary, some sites might be geographically closer to downtown than Arlington Heights.
Well, Hammond is 25 miles away, so is Arlington Heights. So it is not an issue of the distance. So if it gets framed that way, it's being framed that way in order for people to be able to block it, because it's not the reality. That's just political spin.
From a business sense, though, locating in Hammond or Gary or just across the border, as these representatives are looking at, does that make sense in terms of luring the most fans out there in times when the Bears might not have a good season? Maybe it's tougher to draw fans when someone might want to drive from Winnetka. That might be daunting.
Best place is Arlington Heights. I've said this even when Kevin and the Bears were focused on the lakefront. I knew the lakefront was never going to happen. If Melody Hobson and George Lucas contributing $1 billion for a museum on the museum campus can't get it done, there was no chance they were going to build a stadium there.
They have Friends of the Parks to thank for that one.
Well, and they would have been around again, yes. And they weren't asking for multiple billions for infrastructure and to make the park nicer and things like that of government money. So that was never going to happen, but all right, they made an effort. It set them back a little bit, but they made an effort. Arlington Heights was the right location. Their heat map of where their season ticket holders are, that is a much better site than Hammond or Gary or Northwest Indiana. But, and this is the most important thing, Paris, even though it's the best site, there is no deal at that site. So you have to go where a deal may be. And there may be a deal, and there may be other attractive aspects to it, because once you cross state lines, all the tax revenues that are generated are all new to the jurisdiction. So Indiana could say, we could actually put money into the stadium and still not have it cost us anything. All the income taxes, all of the sales taxes, all the amusement taxes, all are new dollars. We can bond against it if you're Indiana,
right.
And it's all new dollars. So you don't, if you're Illinois, you do not want them going too deeply into the negotiations with Indiana, because it may be that deal becomes too attractive.
There's absolutely a deal they could do, but shouldn't this have been done 3 years ago in the beginning of the process?
Absolutely.
If you want to get leverage, this is a way to do it, let's be honest. And 3 years ago, they were at the start of this process, but now they've gone Arlington Heights, city, Arlington Heights.
Yeah. Look, I'm not going to sit here and tell you the Bears have done this perfectly each step of the way. I could give you chapter and verse of somebody who's been doing this for decades of how I would have done it. But I also will tell you the political side needs to step up. Howard Street is not the demilitarized zone. Chicago legislators should not be looking that it is so myopically that unless it's within the geographic region of the city, it is something to be opposed. That's just not the way a community
and it's
should
the
work.
Chicago legislators that have blocked this by and large.
Yes.
Well, Governor Pritzker said, here's the deal. If you pay off the debt that's still owed on Soldier Field, which is around $500 million, we'll give you your bill.
All right, that is a person who is not serious. That's a person, the kind of statement that simply does not get to a deal. The Bears had nothing to do with the city refinancing the debt on Soldier Field time and time again.
Right.
So that's like saying to somebody who's a renter in your building, okay, you can leave after your term is over,
my
but you have to
mortgage.
pay off, which I've refinanced multiple times.
Right.
That was a non-serious statement. And frankly, those are the kinds of statements that demonstrate that you don't want to get a deal done. And it never should have been said, because he's too smart for that. He had to know that making that statement does not get you closer to a deal, and that it was an impossibility. Why throw that out publicly?
And then Kevin Warren saying in this letter that the legislators have informed him this is not going to be a priority for 2026.
That, to me, was the most important sentence in the entire letter. How can you negotiate with people who say that we're not going to negotiate with you for an entire year, and with no promises about 27 as well? So you have to have two sides. You need the state to put together a group of professionals, traffic planners, infrastructure. The Bears have come up with the infrastructure plan. The state has people who do this professionally, do it all the time. They may have a better approach to it. Maybe it's not the number that the Bears have said. Let the Bears say what the stadium needs, but let the state professionals.
Yeah, we know they
come
need
up
an
with it.
exit off of the highway there. They need a bridge or a tunnel over the tracks. I mean, isn't that something IDOT or should be doing?
Exactly. Let the professionals do it. The ones who do it all the time, who know the state's road system better than anybody else. But you need the state to participate in that. You need the governor's office to put the resources of the administrative part of the state to work on it. And that's part of what's been missing in this process.
All right, Mark Gannis, big discussion. And, after today, I think we'll be going back to worrying about how we beat the Packers and maintain our hold in first place in the NFC North, because it's exciting time on the field, but the drama is always going off the field. And thank you so much for being here, as always.
My pleasure.
And when we come back, President Trump saber rattles war in Venezuela, plus the future of Obamacare subsidies. Illinois Congressman Brad Schneider gives us the lowdown.